When you think of ancient Rome, what comes to mind? Majestic aqueducts, powerful legions, toga-clad senators, or maybe the roar of the crowd in the Colosseum, the clash of steel, and the desperate fight for survival. Today, we repealing back the gilded veneer of Roman history to stare into the dark heart of its most popular form of entertainment, the arena spectacles. These weren't just thrilling contests, they were brutal, inhumane events that pushed the boundaries of life and death for public amusement. So, buckle up as we journey back in time to witness the Roman games that went way, way too far. Let's start with the most iconic image of the arena. The gladiators. We often picture them as heroic figures, chiseled warriors fighting for glory. But the reality was much grimmer. Most gladiators were not volunteers. They were prisoners of war, condemned criminals, or enslaved individuals forced into a life of combat. Their training was relentless, their lives expendable. They were seen as property, assets to be used and discarded. While some, like Spartacus, became legends, the vast majority died anonymously on the sand. Their final moments, nothing more than a passing thrill for the spectators. The glorious combat we see in movies was, for most, a death sentence with a roaring audience. But gladiatorial combat was just the beginning. The Romans craved novelty, and the games evolved to become ever more elaborate and cruel. One of the most horrifying spectacles was the damnatio ad bestias, or condemnation to the beasts. Criminals and religious dissenters were thrown into the arena, unarmed and helpless, to be torn apart by starved, exotic animals. Lions, tigers, bears, leopards all were imported from the far corners of the empire, specifically for this purpose. Imagine the terror. It wasn't a fight, it was a public execution, disguised as entertainment, a gruesome warning to anyone who dared defy Roman authority. The crowd would cheer as human beings were mauled, treating the horrific scene as a perfectly normal part of their day. Then there were the naumachia, or staged naval battles. Sounds impressive, right? And it was, on a scale that's hard to fathom today. Emperors would flood entire amphitheaters, like the Colosseum itself, or even excavate massive artificial lakes to recreate famous sea battles. Thousands of prisoners and condemned men were forced onto ships to reenact these historic conflicts. But here's the horrifying twist. These were not simulations. The participants were expected to fight to the death. The ships would ram each other, men would be thrown overboard, and the water would turn red. Emperor Claudius once staged a naumachia with 19,000 combatants. Before the battle began, the participants famously cried out, "Hail, Emperor! We who are about to die salute you." It was a breathtaking spectacle of engineering and a chilling display of utter disregard for human life. The Romans also had a twisted sense of humor, which led to some truly bizarre and cruel events. They staged fatal charades, where myths were reenacted with a deadly conclusion. A prisoner might be dressed as Icarus and thrown from a great height. Another might be forced to play the role of a mythical hero burned alive. These weren't actors with special effects. They were real people, suffering real, agonizing deaths to tell a story for the crowd's amusement. It was a grotesque fusion of theater and execution, blurring the lines between art and atrocity. The audience would appreciate the artistic merit of the performance while watching a person's life end in the most theatrical way possible. Another particularly dark chapter was the meridianum spectaculum, the midday show. This was the filler content between the morning animal hunts and the afternoon gladiator fights. And what filled this slot? Mass executions. This wasn't the damnatio ad bestias with its wild animals. This was often just straightforward, brutal killing. Prisoners were brought out, sometimes forced to fight each other with the survivor being executed anyway, or simply put to the sword in front of the jeering crowd. The Roman philosopher Seneca attended one of these shows and was horrified. He wrote that, compared to this, all the fighting that went on before was humane. He described it as pure and simple murder, where the crowd would chant for the killings to continue. It shows that even some Romans were disturbed by the depths of this depravity. So, why did the Romans indulge in such barbarity? For the emperors and the ruling class, the games were a powerful tool of control, a policy known as bread and circus. By providing free food and spectacular, violent entertainment, they kept the massive, often restless population of Rome distracted and pacified. It was a way to display their power, dispose of enemies, and reinforce the social order. The games demonstrated the emperor's wealth and the vast reach of the empire. Through the exotic animals and diverse prisoners, for the common people, it was a visceral escape from the hardships of daily life, a form of communal catharsis where societal rules were temporarily suspended and death became a spectator sport. These spectacles weren't just a fringe activity. They were the beating heart of Roman urban culture for centuries. Emperors like Trajan celebrated military victories with games lasting over 100 days, involving thousands of gladiators and animals. The sheer scale and duration of this state-sponsored violence it became normalized, an ingrained part of what it meant to be Roman. Over time, however, attitudes began to shift. The rise of Christianity, with its emphasis on the sanctity of life, played a significant role. Christian writers and thinkers condemned the games as immoral and pagan. As the empire adopted Christianity as its state religion, the official sanction for these brutal traditions began to wane. The last recorded gladiatorial combat in Rome took place in the early 5th century AD, the era of the great arena spectacles, which had defined Roman entertainment for so long, finally came to an end. Looking back, the Roman arena is a chilling reminder of how entertainment can be used as a tool of power and how easily a society can become desensitized to violence. The Colosseum may be a magnificent ruin today, a testament to Roman engineering, but it's also a monument to countless forgotten lives sacrificed for a show. It stands as a silent witness to some of the most brutal and inhumane spectacles humanity has ever devised. Thank you so much for joining me on this dark journey into Rome's past. If you found this exploration of history fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that time forgot. Let me know in the comments what other historical topics you'd like to see covered. See you in the next video.